So yes, President Trump at the G7 summit in the working session right now, but he's leaving Canada tomorrow morning, well before the end of the summit, to head east, far east, Singapore and the summit with North Korea. Now that the summit is a go, at least for now, what exactly happens after it is the big question. Just how will the U.S. and the Trump administration keep tabs on whether North Korea is complying with agreements that might be made at the summit? I want to bring in the former CIA Deputy Division Chief for Korea, Bruce Klingner, and former Undersecretary of the Secretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy and the Environment, and the man who in the early 70s helped President Richard Nixon open diplomatic relations with China's communist government, Bob Hormats. Bruce, I will begin with you. You are all things Asia right now. The summit has been set, but what happens, let's just say there is some type of deal struck, and before that even, do you believe that we'll all walk away from this seeing North Korea denuclearize, get rid of their nuclear warheads?
I think all the Korea watchers are extremely skeptical that North Korea will actually totally abandon its nuclear arsenal. You know, that said, we can get back on the horse again. We've had 8 international agreements with North Korea that all failed. But I think what we need to have is, if Kim Jong-un is really willing to go down the denuclearization path, we need to have arms control treaties like those we had with the Soviet Union. We need very detailed text, clearly delineating everyone's requirements. And we also need to have robust verification protocols, such as we had with the START and the INF and CFE treaties. I worked arms control at CIA. I was a member of a negotiating delegation. So you can write out provisions to not only assess the declared information by North Korea, but also to try to catch any cheating.
My worry when I first heard about this, and I wish President Trump the very best, is that Kim Jong-un is the man who had his half-brother murdered, had his face smeared with some type of nerve agent in an airport in Malaysia. I mean, people were paid. It's been traced back to him. He's also the guy who had his uncle killed because it was a threat, and he, fed his uncle body to the dogs. I'm just wondering, who even believes anything this guy says? Plus, they have this underground, very complicated Rube Goldberg tunnel system that is hiding so much. Bruce?
Well, it certainly, we are skeptical that he will give up the weapons because that's what has been a key source of the legitimizing of his regime, and also what North Korea sees as deterring the U.S. from attacking it like the U.S. attacked Iraq and others. They point to our hostile policy. So, but we're hoping that the president will go in and require very detailed commitments by the North, because we know that North Korea even has different definitions of what denuclearization is, or
yes.
even and the Korean Peninsula. We see it as the landmass. They see it as anything that influences the peninsula, including our bombers down at Guam.
Okay. Bob Hormats, nothing happens in North Korea without China. Am I correct? And you were there during the Nixon era, opening up this relationship with China and the U.S. Do you believe that China is guiding all of this and telling Kim Jong-un what to do and say?
No, I don't. I think that China has a considerable amount of influence over Pyongyang and Chairman Kim, but I think that he has a mind of his own, and while China has influence because it's the chief economic trading partner, although not the only one, the Russians have a big trading relationship with them, the North makes its own decisions, and the Chinese can't always bring them to do what China would like them to do.
Will China allow Kim Jong-un to simply denuclearize, or does it help them to have North Korea be on their side and sort of dangle food in front of them? That's where they get their food, is from China.
Well, that's a complicated issue. I think that the Chinese would not like to see a widening of the influence of the South on the North, and I think they would like to have the North have some degree of a power base on its own. On the other hand, they do not like the notion of escalation on the Korean Peninsula, and if the North were to continue along the lines of building further its nuclear capability. The Chinese do not like the idea that the South might do the same, and the Japanese might do the same. So they would like more stability, and they're not sure what the U.S. would do, and they certainly don't want the disruption of American military activities against the North, which could disrupt Northeast Asia and hurt them and their economy.
Bruce, what is the number one thing President Trump needs to do to make this successful?
Well, he needs to get North Korea to very clearly and publicly and unequivocally commit to CVID, the comprehensive or the complete, verifiable, irreversible dismantlement of its programs, which is required under numerous UN resolutions.
Sorry to interrupt, but why would Kim Jong-un ever do that? Isn't that the key to the Kim family holding on to their grip of power? Their own people will overthrow him if they know that there are no more nuclear weaponry, nuclear weapons that can hold them back or be used against them.
Right. Well, Kim has said he's willing to talk about denuclearization. I think he just has very different terms than the U.S. Wants as well as the UN requires. So some would see that he's willing to shift away from a reliance on nuclear weapons towards economic development. I think it's a question of he wants guns and butter. It's a policy based on something that his grandfather actually put into place.
And Bob, you were also vice chair at Goldman Sachs. Do you see this moving the markets depending on the outcome?
Well, I think a good outcome would be positive for the markets because it would create more stability in the region. That's a plus, and people worried about the United States going to war in North Korea would then feel more confident, and they would see it as a positive step in terms of international activity by this administration. If it's a negative and there's more saber rattling on both sides, the markets would probably take it badly. But so far, the markets don't seem to be overly disrupted or overly positive one way or another. It's the markets are looking at a lot of other things, I think, more than this. As important as this is, they probably don't think it's going to have a big market effect one way or another, although at the margin it certainly will one way or the other.
Yes, I would imagine we'll be all over it. Bob, Bruce, great to have you on this discussion. Thank you very much.